Competitive shooters. Quake, Counter-Strike, Valorant, I'm sure you've all heard of them. These games have remained a staple of the FPS genre to this day, pretty much since the advent of Doom's deathmatch mode. These days, the genre seems to be ruled by a few giants, with fresh introductions to the scene needing to really innovate to bring new players in or keep their existing ones, which makes the prospect of releasing one as a 15-person indie studio a daunting task. Enter Due Process, a 5-on-5 tactical competitive shooter released in November of 2020. Due Process has been without a doubt the most fun competitive shooter I've ever played, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why. Due Process is a 5-on-5 tactical shooter set in a cyberpunk version of our world, where one side attacks and the other defends. Well, obviously. The attackers need to breach the building and either eliminate the defenders or defuse the bomb, while the defenders need to either eliminate the attackers or level the city block by running the clock down.
Oh, that's so cool!
Every round begins in the planning phase, where teams are provided with a top-down view of the map and the locations of all the doors and the objectives. The teams then plan out the strategy by placing utility markers, marking breach points, or just by drawing a shit ton of dicks and crabs all over the map like my buddies. You'll then take your weapons from the equipment pool, more on that later, and play out the match until one side is victorious or the aforementioned city block has been leveled. Now, if you're someone who plays a lot of competitive shooters, you might be asking, Jake, why would I need to know the layout of the maps in the pre-round? I mean, listen, I've played Rainbow, I've played Counter-Strike, these games have like 5 or 6 maps that I've completely memorized and know all the strategies on. I'm good. That's a waste of time, I don't need to see it. Well, dear viewer, what if I told you the maps in this game are special? And why I love Due Process so much, and really set it apart from any other competitive shooter that I've played. The maps in Due Process are randomly generated every game. And this feature is without a doubt the defining part of Due Process. Every week, new maps are delivered, creating a fresh experience every time you play this game. Now, why is this so cool? Because competitive shooters live and die by their maps. Most mainstream competitive shooters carefully curate and select a handful of their best and most viable maps to play on. Certain maps have become legends in the scene, while others have had to have direct developer intervention to fix them or be removed altogether. This leaves these kinds of games with maps that have usually played to death by their communities. Think Dust 2, Oregon, etc. You probably know the strats on these maps. You know them half to death. You set up that clubhouse bar hold more times than you can count, and you've run down those tunnels into B countless times over your Counter-Strike career. Point is, you know what to expect. Setups become routine, strategies become solidified, and eventually, the map sort of becomes the background to the game. But Due Process changes all that. Fresh maps each week means you don't get the chance you would expect to settle in and become comfortable. Each week, you, your team, and your opponents are reset back to the same baseline map knowledge. Not only does this encourage careful study of the map every round, testing your ability to learn and execute your plans on the fly, but Due Process also uses this to take a huge leap forward in terms of accessibility to this genre. These kinds of competitive shooters have a very high learning curve to entry, and at least when I started playing games like Counter-Strike and Siege, a lot of that seemed to be wrapped up in map knowledge, especially for games like Rainbow with the destructible environment, and Counter-Strike you need to learn sort of rotations and what goes where, that sort of thing. But with Due Process, the procedural generation makes the game pretty accessible because it first reduces the maps to a sort of tile set. So that's a few call-out rooms that can persist between iterations, but it takes the strategy layer and makes it so you don't need to really fuss over map-specific strategies. You're learning the map for the first time with everyone, so the strategies are kind of cooked on the fly along with everyone else. So things like lineups, rotates, and the 4 spots that guy could be hiding as he approaches the bomb site aren't supposed to be kept in your mind as you play around. What you need to know is the plan, which brings me to the gameplay. Due Process's round structure borrows a lot of influences from the economy team-based shooters you've no doubt heard of, like Counter-Strike and Valorant, where you split between 3 sides on the attacking side and 3 sides on the defending side. But it takes a really interesting approach to the economy that I haven't seen before, and I think it's really neat. After the planning phase, you'll find that you spawn in without any equipment at all, so it's time to load up. But something is a little different here. Instead of buying equipment by clicking on some squares on a menu, you walk up to your respective team's weapons cache and grab them yourselves. Utility, magazines, and everything. And first, let me gush about how awesome I think this is. I think it's so perfect for the theme the developers have going here, where it's this attacker force of these jacked up cyber police that get this super industrial looking sort of APC with the weapons all nicely lined up on these weapon racks, as opposed to the defenders, who you can clearly tell are like these ragtag anti-corpo force that have this like slapdash collection of weapons in the back of a room somewhere. I think that's an awesome touch. Now, after you grab your equipment, you'll play out the round like normal. But when you respawn for round 2 and you're still on the same side, you'll notice that the weapons you've taken from that cache are gone, which I think is the really cool part of Due Process's economy management. And this pool-based, let's call it pool-based economy is really interesting because it enables a few layers of interplay between the attackers and the defenders. For example, the defenders are always going to know that the attackers can bring one wall charge to open up a wall or a big door, 2 door charges to open up, doors, and 2 clackers. And the clackers are interesting because they enable those explosives to get set off. You can't detonate them by yourself. You need someone to carry the clacker, or you bring another util slot to carry it yourself. So rather than the attackers being able to purchase a wall charge every round, the defenders know that the round they come up against a wall charge, it's done. The attackers won't be able to use that anymore. Or if a defender can steal a clacker off an attacker's body, the attackers will only have 1 clacker to work with. Or they might have just robbed their last one. And with the game's power weapons, like the equivalents to the op, available on round 1, you can run those on any map for any strategy, but more on those in a second. Likewise, if the attackers can knock out the lights 2 times in a row, they know that the second time there'll be little to no road flares left for the defenders to see the attackers with, leading to a pretty clean sweep on those rounds. And all those strats wouldn't really be possible if you could just buy infinite pools of that item every round. So I think it's pretty cool. It's probably one of the cooler features of the game next to the maps, the fact that your economy becomes sort of a resource management opportunity rather than how much can I buy this round. And in terms of utility, the attackers can bring the aforementioned boom devices, the wall charge and the door charge. They also get 2 frag grenades for blowing people up and a shit ton of flashbangs for flashing enemies, and 2 smoke grenades for about a minute of smoke, which is really valuable in some of the smaller maps. Defenders can bring a few rolls of barbed wire to slow people down, a couple flares to see in the dark, and a fire extinguisher to make a shorter lasting but more convenient cloud of smoke, because you can shoot the fire extinguisher to make it burst. The attackers can only take 3 types of primary weapons. They can take the AP-25 carbine, which is sort of like a versatile assault rifle. They can take the black tar rifle, which is a long range option, and they get the DL-12 shotgun, which is for close range. And the shotgun in this game is pretty unique in that you can shoot certain locks off of doors, which gives you additional breaching options for a round. And the sort of power weapon for attackers is the saber rifle, which is a one-shot headshot sniper rifle. So it's kind of like the op, but headshot only. The defenders get more guns, and there are slight little specializations inside of those categories. So for example, in terms of handguns, they can pick between the GAT-9, which is like 20 rounds and it does really bad damage per shot, or they can pick the 45 long slide, which deals high damage per shot, but you only get 7 shots. Or in terms of SMGs, you can either get like the bullet hose Mac-10, the NAC-11 it's called, or you can get the sort of stable and consistent but low damage per shot Gruber 5. Now, I think this is done for a couple reasons. The first one obviously is to differentiate the attackers and defenders thematically. The attackers have this cool set of high-tech gear, and the defenders have sort of things they found in a back room somewhere that they sort of scrounged together. But in terms of mechanical difference, it really boils down to the attackers have more generalist weapons, and the defenders have more niche weapons. And I think this is because the defenders have the luxury of starting inside the map, right? They're defending. So they can tailor their arsenal to specific strategies. So if I wanted to hold a really long lane that I knew lots of people were coming in, I would take an Ingmar rifle because it's automatic, it's got a high zoom scope, that sort of thing. But how do these weapons handle? Well, the gunplay in Due Process follows the convention of each weapon having a mostly predictable recoil pattern that you can control with well-executed spray control, like mouse movements. You can carry up to 2 magazines for your chosen weapon, and when you reload, you'll cycle through to the next magazine, which will help conserve your ammunition. So if I shot one to 13 rounds and reloaded, I would get back to that one eventually. But you can also double tap to quickly reload, which will drop the magazine, so you have a little bit of an option there if you need it. Following on that trend of options, you can either ADS to aim, which will give you the smallest sort of recoil deviation, or you can brace, and bracing is sort of you'll hold your weapon up in a halfway between hip firing and aiming, which gives you a laser sight for easy target acquisition, but it will make your recoil deviate more than if you were ADSing. Which is pretty neat because it adds another spray pattern potentially that you can master, but it gives you an interesting decision to make mid-round on whether or not you want to ADS for more recoil control or react quicker with the brace aim. In an interview with the developers, they said that they wanted both sides to feel like they're fighting an unfair fight, and I think that that premise was executed really well. The attackers have high-tech guns, which are more applicable to any situation, more health due to body armor, and gear and utility which is angled towards being fast and aggressive, while the defenders are more frail, quieter, and carry sort of the archaic weaponry, and have the luxury of starting the round entrenched in the building already with delay causing utility and niche weapons to help them hold all manner of positions. Now where was I? Right, after we load up, it's time to breach the building if we're the attackers or get ready to weather the storm if we're defending. After the defenders set up, there's nothing but quiet ambience and the loud clank of enforcer armor as the attackers stride towards the bomb site. Then silence, 3 clacks, and all shit hits the fan as the attackers try and execute their plan with the defenders trying to stop them. Standard FPS stuff, you know it well by this point. And the spectacle of watching your plan either come together or fall apart beautifully or miserably is kind of easy for anyone to fall in love with this game. Whether it be a perfect strat or an insane clutch, I think Due Process has a great feel to it that doesn't get old even after hundreds of matches. In an incredible segue, I'll talk about the art style and sound next. Bear in mind, I'm not really an art person, so don't expect a deep analysis, but Due Process uses pixel graphics, which is a novel and distinguishing take from the gritty realistic graphics of the competitive shooters or the sort of pop bright colors of Valorant. The cool part to me is that it's inspired by light gun arcade games like House of the Dead and Time Crisis, and I find that's displayed most clearly when the enemies flash red when taking damage and have these long, drawn out, really exaggerated death animations like I'm playing one of those games, which is really neat. On the sound side, the soundtrack is pretty cool. You've probably listened to it at this point if I remember to put parts of it in the video. The songs for both sides when you're in the planning phase set the tone pretty well, and the positional audio does the job, and the sound cues are identifiable, but that's just about it. It's nothing crazy. So overall, the art is pretty clean and it doesn't get in the way. And the cyberpunk theme I think is really cool, because I'm kind of a sucker for those kinds of games. The game does have a tiny issue in the fact that it's a little bit dead, and I've been told they run some matches in their official Discord, but I don't really go in there too often. Due Process to me is a perfect in-house game, where if 4 or 5 of your friends are online, 6, you split up into small teams and you play the game in short matches in their short match mode. And I find that's been giving me my first-person shooter fix as of late. So I mean, if you and your friends do game nights on Discord or something, the game is pretty generously priced even to start off, but when it goes on sale, the discount makes it very much worth buying. So I know that not enough people watch my videos that I expect this game to make some glorious comeback, but if I found a game and recommended it to you and you enjoyed it, then I'll be happy about that. So on that note, thank you so much for watching this all the way to the end. I'm sorry this took so long. I had work and life get in the way for this, and Due Process is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, so thank you for listening. And thank you so much for like 4,000 views on the live service video. That was just sort of, I had a bunch of bullet points in front of me and I was articulating my thoughts on why I didn't really like live service, and I think that was pretty well received. There were a lot of like nice discussions in the comments. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, guys. So until then, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching and have yourself a great day.